Imagine walking into a medical clinic seeking help for a persistent ailment, only to find the doctor is actually a high school student in a lab coat. This scenario sounds like the plot of a fictional movie or a far-fetched comedy sketch, but for residents of West Palm Beach, Florida, it became a bizarre reality. A confident young man with a stethoscope draped around his neck and a smooth demeanor managed to fool patients and professionals alike into believing he was a licensed physician. The audacity of his deception raises terrifying questions about the security of our medical institutions and the ease with which charisma can mask a lack of credentials. This case challenges our trust in authority figures and exposes the cracks in the systems designed to protect the vulnerable. The story begins in the humid and bustling environment of South Florida, where the lines between reality and illusion often blur under the bright sun. In January of the year 2015, a peculiar incident occurred at St. Mary's Medical Center, a respected hospital in the area. Staff members noticed a young male wandering the halls wearing a white coat with the hospital logo and a stethoscope. He did not look like the typical medical resident or attending physician usually seen in the obstetrics and gynecology department. His face was round and youthful, lacking the weary lines of someone who had survived years of medical school and residency. Yet he walked with an air of absolute belonging that initially deflected suspicion from the busy nurses and doctors rushing past him. The young man was eventually identified as Malachi Love Robinson, who was only 17 years old at the time of the initial incident at St. Mary's Medical Center. Witnesses reported that he was peeking in on a gynecological exam, which immediately raised red flags among the actual medical staff. When confronted by security and police, he claimed he was a doctor, but the authorities quickly determined he was a minor with no medical training whatsoever. Despite the alarming nature of his actions, the hospital declined to press charges and decided to handle the matter internally. His mother was called to pick him up, and the police let him go with a warning, assuming this was merely a strange episode of teenage rebellion or confusion. However, this brush with the law did not deter the ambitious teenager from pursuing his fantasy of being a medical professional. Instead of retreating into the background, Malachi Love Robinson doubled down on his delusions and began planning a much more elaborate scheme. He seemed driven by an insatiable need for validation and status that a high school diploma could not provide. He created profiles on various websites listing himself as a naturopathic physician and began networking in the local community. He utilized the internet to craft a digital persona that appeared legitimate to anyone who did not look too closely. This digital fabrication was the foundation for a physical deception that would soon endanger the health and finances of real people. By early 2016, Malachi Love Robinson had taken his charade to an entirely new level by securing a physical location for his practice. He opened a clinic called the New Birth New Life Medical Center, an urgent care situated in a professional office building in West Palm Beach. It is baffling to consider how a teenager with no credit history or medical license managed to lease a commercial space and set up a fully furnished medical office. He walked into the leasing office with confidence and seemingly convinced the landlords that he was a legitimate doctor ready to serve the community. The clinic was equipped with exam tables and medical supplies, and even had a waiting room where patients would soon sit expecting professional care. The grand opening of the New Birth New Life Medical Center was not a quiet affair conducted in the shadows. Malachi Love Robinson invited the community to celebrate the launch of his practice and even cut a ceremonial ribbon. He hired staff members to work at the front desk and assist with administrative tasks, adding layers of legitimacy to his operation. These employees likely believed they were working for a young prodigy or a talented doctor who had graduated early. The sight of him in a white lab coat, giving orders and managing the clinic created a convincing theater that suspended disbelief. Patients began to trickle in seeking treatments for various conditions, completely unaware that their doctor was barely old enough to vote. As the weeks went by, the teenager treated patients and offered medical advice that could have had disastrous consequences. He presented himself as Dr. Love and spoke with a mixture of medical jargon and holistic buzzwords that sounded plausible to the untrained ear. He claimed to treat everything from common colds to more serious chronic conditions using naturopathic methods. The danger in this situation was extreme because patients with real illnesses might delay seeking actual medical treatment while under his care. He took their blood pressure and listened to their hearts and even gave physical examinations. The level of intimacy and trust required in a doctor-patient relationship was being exploited by someone who viewed medicine as a role-playing game. Suspicion began to mount not from his patients initially, but from other professionals, and eventually, the authorities who received anonymous tips. The Florida Department of Health started receiving complaints about a young man practicing medicine without a license. A particularly damning tip came from a local addiction treatment center, where Malachi Love Robinson had reportedly shown up claiming to be a doctor. The medical community in West Palm Beach is tight-knit, and word began to spread about the boy doctor operating out of the office building. Detectives from the Palm Beach County Narcotics Task Force were assigned to investigate the case and verify the credentials of the mysterious Dr. Love. The investigation revealed a tangled web of lies and falsified documents that Malachi Love Robinson had used to prop up his fake identity. Detectives found that he had obtained a PhD from a purely online institution that was known for selling degrees without rigorous academic requirements. He used this piece of paper to justify the title of doctor, although it conferred no legal right to practice medicine in the state of Florida. The investigators also discovered that he had stolen checks from a patient during a house call, which added a financial crime element to the medical fraud. The brazen nature of his actions suggested he felt untouchable, or perhaps truly believed his own fabrication. To catch him in the act, the Palm Beach County Sheriff Office devised a sting operation involving an undercover female officer. The plan was for the officer to pose as a patient complaining of illness and seeking treatment at the New Birth, New Life Medical Center. This is a standard tactic in medical fraud cases, as it provides irrefutable evidence of the suspect practicing medicine. The undercover officer made an appointment and walked into the clinic just like any other patient. She observed the waiting room and the staff, and the general atmosphere of the place, which looked disturbingly like a legitimate medical practice. She was eventually called back to the examination room to meet the teenage doctor. Inside the exam room, Malachi Love Robinson conducted a physical examination of the undercover officer. He listened to her lungs with a stethoscope and checked her heart rate, acting every bit the part of a seasoned physician. He asked her questions about her symptoms and nodded thoughtfully as she described her fake ailments. The pivotal moment came when he offered a diagnosis and medical advice, solidifying the crime of practicing medicine without a license. The officer signaled her team, and the illusion was shattered in an instant. Deputies swarmed the office and placed the teenager in handcuffs while he was still wearing his white lab coat. The arrest of Malachi Love Robinson became a viral sensation almost overnight as news outlets across the country picked up the story. Headlines dubbed him Dr. Love, and the public was fascinated by the sheer audacity of an 18-year-old running a fake clinic. People struggled to understand how he had managed to fool so many people and operate for a month without being stopped sooner. The images of the baby-faced teenager in handcuffs being led away by police were plastered on television screens and social media feeds. It was a story that combined elements of Catch Me If You Can with the terrifying reality of medical imposters. Following his arrest, Malachi Love Robinson did not shy away from the spotlight or show the remorse one might expect. He granted interviews to major news networks including Good Morning America, where he defended his actions with surprising defiance. He insisted that he never claimed to be a medical doctor, but rather a naturopathic physician, which he argued was a different category. He claimed his PhD was legitimate and that he was only trying to help people through holistic means. His arguments were legally unsound and factually incorrect, but he delivered them with the same confidence that had allowed him to open the clinic in the first place. During these interviews, he often appeared in a suit and tie, maintaining the professional persona he had crafted. He spoke eloquently and deflected difficult questions, attempting to spin the narrative in his favor. However, the more he spoke, the more holes appeared in his story. Real doctors and legal experts dismantled his claims, pointing out that naturopathic physicians in Florida still require specific licenses, which he did not possess. The public reaction was a mix of amusement at his boldness and outrage at the danger he posed to the community. The media circus surrounding the case only seemed to feed his desire for attention. As the legal proceedings moved forward, more disturbing details about his activities came to light. Prosecutors revealed that he had defrauded an 86-year-old woman named Anita Morrison, who had sought his help for severe stomach pain. During his house calls to her home, he had convinced her to hand over her banking information ostensibly to pay for his services. Instead, he used her account to pay off his car loans and credit card debt, stealing tens of thousands of dollars from the elderly woman. This revelation shifted the public perception from an amusing story of a teenage prankster to a serious case of elder abuse and grand theft. The theft from Anita Morrison was particularly heartless because she had trusted him with her health and her finances. She believed he was a brilliant young doctor who could cure her where others had failed. The betrayal she experienced highlights the predatory nature of medical fraud, where victims are often vulnerable and desperate for relief. Malachi Love Robinson had not just played doctor, he had systematically exploited a sick elderly woman for his own financial gain. This aspect of the case ensured that he would face significant prison time, rather than just a slap on the wrist for impersonating a professional. In court, Malachi Love Robinson faced a laundry list of charges, including practicing medicine without a license and grand theft and fraud. His legal defense team faced an uphill battle given the overwhelming evidence collected during the sting operation and the financial records linking him to the theft. Despite the gravity of the charges, he initially rejected plea deals and seemed convinced he could talk his way out of the situation. His behavior in court was often erratic, and he even attempted to represent himself at one point, which frustrated the judge and delayed the proceedings. The legal saga dragged on for months, keeping the story in the local news cycle. The psychological aspect of the case was a subject of much speculation among observers and experts. Was Malachi Love Robinson merely a con artist looking for easy money, or was he suffering from a delusion that made him believe he was a doctor? Some psychologists suggested that his behavior exhibited traits of narcissism and a pathological need for recognition. The elaborate nature of his lies and his inability to admit wrongdoing, even when caught, pointed to a deep-seated disconnect from reality. He seemed to inhabit a world where, if he acted the part well enough, it would become true. While out on bail awaiting trial for the medical fraud charges, Malachi Love Robinson found himself in trouble with the law yet again. He was arrested in Virginia for attempting to purchase a luxury car using a stolen identity. This subsequent arrest demonstrated a pattern of compulsive deception, and an inability to stop committing fraud. It became clear that his impersonation of a doctor was just one facet of a broader criminal lifestyle centered on theft and false identities. The judge in Florida revoked his bond, and he was returned to jail to await the resolution of his original case. The trial finally reached a conclusion when Malachi Love Robinson accepted a plea deal to avoid a potentially longer prison sentence. He pleaded guilty to practicing medicine without a license and grand theft regarding the money stolen from Anita Morrison. The judge sentenced him to 3.5 years in prison with credit for time served, followed by probation. The sentencing was a somber moment that marked the end of his teenage years, which had been consumed by this elaborate fantasy. The court also ordered him to pay restitution to his victims, although the emotional damage he caused could not be easily repaid. Prison life was a stark contrast to the professional world he had tried to inhabit. The young man who had once commanded a staff and treated patients was now an inmate in the Florida state prison system. Reports from his time incarcerated suggest he kept a relatively low profile compared to his time in the media spotlight. The reality of confinement likely forced a confrontation with the consequences of his actions that no amount of smooth talking could resolve. His story served as a cautionary tale for other aspiring imposters and a lesson for the public to verify the credentials of their healthcare providers. After his release from prison in 2019, Malachi Love Robinson attempted to rebuild his life, but the shadow of his past loomed large. It is difficult for anyone with a high-profile criminal record to find employment, let alone someone known for such a specific and public deception. He eventually found work in logistics and shipping, trying to stay out of the public eye. However, the urge to deceive seemed to linger. In 2020, he was arrested again in Palm Beach County on charges of grand theft and fraud related to his employer. This recidivism suggested that the underlying issues driving his behavior had not been fully addressed. The later arrest involved diverting company funds to his personal accounts, a scheme that mirrored the financial exploitation of his elderly patient years prior. It seemed that Malachi Love Robinson had not learned the necessary lessons from his first stint in prison. This cycle of crime and punishment paints a tragic picture of wasted potential. He clearly possessed intelligence and charisma traits that could have led to success in legitimate fields had he chosen to apply himself honestly. Instead, he chose the path of shortcuts and deception, leading to a life punctuated by arrests and court dates. The case of the teenager who posed as a doctor remains one of the most bizarre chapters in the history of Florida crime. It exposed significant gaps in the regulatory systems that are supposed to prevent unlicensed individuals from opening medical practices. How was he able to obtain a business license and lease an office without showing a medical license? Why did it take a month and a police sting to shut him down? These questions prompted local officials to review their procedures for verifying business types and ensuring public safety. For the medical community, the incident was an embarrassment and a wake-up call. It highlighted the importance of patient education and the need for transparent verification systems. Hospitals and clinics tightened their security protocols regarding badges and uniforms to prevent unauthorized individuals from wandering sensitive areas. The story of Dr. Love became a case study in medical ethics and security training, reminding staff that a white coat and a stethoscope do not make a doctor. It forced a reevaluation of the blind trust that is often placed in medical symbols. The victims of Malachi Love Robinson, particularly the elderly Anita Morrison, suffered lasting impacts from the deception. The financial loss was significant, but the violation of trust was even more damaging. Patients allowed doctors into their most vulnerable moments, believing that the person opposite them is trained and sworn to do no harm. To find out that this person was a high school dropout playing dress-up is a psychological trauma that is hard to overcome. The betrayal strikes at the core of the social contract between healers and the sick. In the years since the story broke, it has been referenced in pop culture and discussions about the psychology of con artists. It serves as a modern example of the catch me if you can archetype, but without the romanticized Hollywood ending. The reality was a trail of victims and a young man spending his prime years behind bars. It is a stark reminder that while confidence can open doors, competence and integrity are required to stay inside. The facade eventually crumbles and the truth is revealed. The legacy of this case is a heightened sense of skepticism among patients in South Florida. People are now more likely to check the credentials of a new doctor or look up their license on the state health department website. This healthy skepticism is perhaps the only positive outcome of the entire affair. It empowers patients to take charge of their own safety and not rely solely on the appearance of authority. In an age of misinformation, verification is a crucial tool for survival. As we look back on the strange saga of Malachi Love Robinson, we are left with a lingering sense of unease. It forces us to ask how many other imposters might be operating under the radar in different professions. If a teenager could fool people into thinking he was a doctor, what else is possible? The story challenges our perceptions of competence and reminds us that appearances can be dangerously deceiving. It is a puzzle of human psychology and systemic failure that will not be easily forgotten. Ultimately, the story of the teenager who posed as a doctor is a tragedy of ambition without direction. It is a narrative about the desperate need for status and the destructive lengths some will go to achieve it. Malachi Love Robinson wanted the respect and admiration that comes with being a physician, but he was unwilling to put in the years of hard work required to earn it. His story stands as a permanent warning that there are no shortcuts to genuine achievement, and that the truth, no matter how well disguised, will always come to light.